Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Liz Everline, and I am the Education Programs Manager at the National Women's History Museum. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this very special Brave Girls presentation of Queen of Tejano music, Selena. For those of you who are with us for the very first time, welcome. For those of you who have attended a Brave Girls program before, we welcome you back. And again, we thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday to be with us this afternoon for this story time. We are recording this presentation so that it can be available on our website following the event. And Sylvia will be available to take questions from all of you following her reading. So if you, your class, or your little one would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. You may ask your question at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many questions as time allows. Selena Quintanilla's music career began at the age of 9 when she started singing in her family's band. She went from using a hairbrush as a microphone to traveling from town to play gigs. But Selena faced a challenge. People said that she would never make it in Tejano music, which was dominated by male performers. And Selena was determined to prove them wrong. Sharing Selena's story with us today is author Sylvia Lopez. Sylvia was born in Cuba and emigrated to Miami as a child. Her lifelong love of books led to a career as a school librarian and later as a children's author. And her work reflects her interest in animals, history, folklore, and people who overcame obstacles to achieve great things. Her books include Just Right Family and Adoption Story, Handimals, Animals and Art and Nature, Hacho Nacho, Queen of Tejano Music, Selena, and My Little Golden Book about Frida Kahlo. Both picture book biographies are in English and Spanish, and My Little Golden Book about Sonia Sotomayor, also in English and Spanish, is scheduled for release in 2022. I'm so pleased that Sylvia could be with us today to share this story. Sylvia, welcome, and I will turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm honored to be here. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share the PowerPoint presentation with you so that you can see the pictures in this book, because the illustrations in the book of Queen of Tejano Music, Selena, are beautiful. Like Liz said, my name is Sylvia Lopez. I came from Cuba when I was 9 with my parents without a word of English. So eventually I loved English so much that I became an English major and then a school librarian and finally a children's author. And I'm very pleased because the books have been published and I'm enjoying a lot sharing them with you, like I'm going to share this one today. So without further ado, I'm going to share here. And so there we see, let me minimize this. Okay, this is my website. It's sylvialopezbooks.com. You can see that the word Sylvia is spelled with an I. You may notice that in some people, you may have a relative or someone that you know that spells it as S-Y, and that's because that's the English spelling of Sylvia, but in Spanish, they spell it with an I. And so my name is spelled Sylvia with an I. It's sylvialopezbooks.com. And that's a picture of my home page on my website. And before I read to you the book that's on there, which is Queen of Tejano Music, Selena, I want to tell you a little bit about that website. So I would love for you to visit my website. This is the home page, but next to it is the tab that says my books, and you can find out a little bit more about all my books. Plus, there are some printable sheets and some activities that you can do with each one of the books. Then, like Liz said, I was a school librarian, and one of the things that I miss the most is not doing my story times that I used to do almost practically every day, or actually every day. So the thing that I missed the most was doing the story times. And so I decided after I was no longer working in the library that I was going to record some of my favorite stories. So I did, and I put them there under stories and read alouds, and you're welcome to access them and listen to them and watch these videos, okay? Then there's that little tab that says ebooks. My very first book was about the Cuban bee hummingbird. It's the smallest bird in the world, and it's the size of a bee. And rather than publishing it in a book, although it is available now, I've turned it into an ebook. And then I went on to do a couple more ebooks in English and Spanish, one about hummingbirds and one about the Tainos, which are the natives of the Caribbean. So if you'd like to see those, they're there. They are the digital books that you can flip the pages, and they're there for you. So here you can see my home page. Of course, this is just a picture. We can't click on anything right here, but without further ado, let's get going on our story. Lake Jackson, Texas, 1977. 6-year-old Selena Quintanilla bounded indoors and raced through the kitchen, startling her mother, Marcela. "Where are you going, Selly?" Marcela asked. "To sing with them, Mommy," replied Selena. "They sound good." In the living room, big brother AB strummed the guitar while big sister Suzette beat rhythm on the drums. Their father, Abraham, had spent weeks teaching his older children to play their instruments. Using a hairbrush as a pretend microphone, Selena burst into song. Abraham had been a musician in his younger days. He listened and watched Selena twirl and dance to the music, and he knew that his little girl was a performer. But who was Selena Quintanilla? She was born on Easter Sunday, April 16, 1971. Her parents, Marcela and Abraham, had thought that their third child would be a boy. They didn't have any girl names. So Marcela borrowed a name from another mom, the name Selena, which means goddess. All right, now I want you to, moon goddess. And I want you to see in this picture, you can see how the illustrator, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, made a picture of the moon right outside the window of the hospital room. So Selena means moon goddess. With a growing family, Abraham put away his music dreams and took a job in Lake Jackson, Texas. It was a good place to live. People of different ethnic groups got along well. Some were Hispanics or Latinos, mostly Mexican-American Tejanos, like the Quintanillas. Selena sang all the time, at family gatherings, to her classmates at recess, while walking to and from school, and even when she was out with the family. I want you to notice that everybody's eating an ice cream cone, but Selena is singing into her ice cream cone. Music was always important to the Quintanillas. They formed a family band called Southern Pearl and practiced every day on secondhand equipment in the garage. "My children are all talented," Abraham said proudly. He decided to quit his job and open a Mexican-style restaurant, which he called Papagayos. Southern Pearl performed there on most weekends. 9-year-old Selena liked to sing American pop songs. But the Quintanillas' life was about to change. In the early 1980s, times became tough in America. People lost jobs. They had less money to eat in restaurants, and in 1983, Papagayos had to close. The family sold all they had to pay bills and moved to Corpus Christi, another city in Texas. Music became a way to make a living. With her as the main attraction, the band took the name Selena Y Los Dinos, Selena and the Boys. On stage, Selena wore makeup and flashy homemade clothes to look older. But at home, she was just like any other 12-year-old. Abraham was very strict. And besides, she was always too busy rehearsing and performing to socialize. On weekends, everyone from extra musicians to the family dog traveled to shows in an old van. Each time we turned, I rolled off the seat. Selena laughed. Money was tight. The band traveled from town to town, often sleeping in the van and eating food from roadside stands. We ate a lot of hamburgers and shared everything, Selena said. On the road, many people asked for Tejano music, also called Tex-Mex. A lot of Tejano music is sung in Spanish. This was a problem for the Quintanilla children who were born and raised in the US. They understood the language, but didn't speak it well. Abraham told Selena she would have to learn to at least sing in Spanish. I can't, Papi, she complained. I don't know what the words mean. So Abraham wrote down how the words sounded, and Selena memorized them. She sang in Spanish with lots of feeling, though at first she wasn't always sure of what she was saying. Soon, Selena faced another obstacle. Tejano performers had mostly been men. Some places refused to book a band with a girl lead singer. People told my father we would never make it, Selena said. I wanted to prove them wrong. Selena's brother AB started writing new Tejano songs. They had a more modern beat. And Selena made up fun steps. The young fans loved them. When Selena Y Los Dinos made their first recording, radio stations liked it and the band got new bookings, but this created another problem. Traveling meant that Selena often missed school. The family just could not afford to pass up any shows. Selena had to leave school in the 8th grade. But she began taking long-distance classes and studying on the road. Everyone helped her with the lessons. And I want you to notice on this illustration, the long-distance classes do not include a computer. She would get the books and the workbooks from the teachers in the mail, and she would fill them out and do the tests and the workbooks and send them back in the mail. But she did graduate from high school. In 1985, Selena Y Los Dinos was invited to be on a Friends television show. The TV audience loved the band's lively new Tejano rhythm and flashy outfits. The success brought more bookings at more important events, but still, equipment and travel were expensive. There wasn't a whole lot left. If we got $5 or $10, Selena said, it meant we could go to eat at Whataburger. That was the big treat. Selena loved to sew. She decorated costumes with pearls, rhinestones, and lace. Some of the outfits showed off her figure. At first, her dad was not happy. The music of Selena Y Los Dinos celebrated family values. Abraham didn't approve of drinking, drugs, or bad language, and he didn't want his daughter giving the wrong impression. People like to see fancy costumes in the shows, Papi, Selena assured him. They know who I really am inside. Off stage, Selena led a quiet life. She spent a lot of time in the band's new bus, which was nicknamed Big Bertha, sewing, studying, or working on songs. She didn't go to school dances or football games or even out on dates. Her life was all about making music. Selena's first big recognition came in 1986 when she was just 15. At the Tejano Music Awards, she won Female Vocalist of the Year, which means Best Girl Singer. From then on, she went on to win this and many other awards year after year. The Tejano girl lead singer had proven everyone wrong. Always believe that the impossible is possible became one of her favorite sayings. When Selena made a commercial for Coca-Cola in both English and Spanish, TV audiences all across America saw her talent. Selena Y Los Dinos were offered a big recording contract. Selena was proud of her Hispanic heritage and her appearance. She wanted other Latina girls to feel good about their looks too. Be at your best at all times was her motto. Fans started calling her the Queen of Tejano music, or the Queen of Tex-Mex. In 1989, a musician named Chris Perez joined Los Dinos. He and Selena fell in love. Abraham thought Selena was too young to have a boyfriend. But for the first time in her life, Selena opposed her father's wishes. 3 years later, she married Chris, and soon Abraham welcomed him into the family. Selena made Tejano music popular in Mexico too. Fans began flocking to the concerts. In 1992, Mexican newspapers, radio stations, and TV shows wanted to interview her. Selena was nervous. Her Spanish was fine for singing, but was it good enough to answer questions? When she arrived in Mexico, Selena flashed her dazzling smile. Then she hugged all 35 reporters, one by one. When she made a mistake in Spanish during the interview, she asked them to excuse her. She said she was trying hard to learn the language of her songs, the language of her ancestors. The reporters appreciated Selena's honesty. They called her one of our own, brown and proud. One newspaper said she was an artist of the people. But Selena never forgot her early struggles and those of her family. Money from her concerts often went to charity. She also reached out to the community. She visited schools to speak out against drugs. She spoke about the value of an education. Selena wanted to help young people achieve their dreams. And then she also focused on some dreams of her own. Selena loved designing clothes. Why not open a shop to sell her creations? In 1994, 2 stores called Selena Etc. opened in Corpus Christi and San Antonio, Texas. Both were very successful. In fact, that whole year was filled with successes. The song Bitty Bitty Bom Bom, which Selena helped write, became wildly popular. And when one of her albums was named Best Mexican American Album at the 1994 Grammy Awards, it was the first time that a Tejano woman had ever achieved such a huge honor. Selena had always loved American pop. Remember when she sang at Papagayos? But for years, producers would not offer her and the band contracts. They thought audiences might not listen to a Latino group performing American music. It was different now. Selena already had thousands of Spanish-speaking fans and thousands of English-speaking fans. She began to record in English too. This is the last page of the book, which is like the cover. It's one of my favorite illustrations. I'm going to read you almost the whole page because I like what it says. Selena's gift. People who met Selena Quintanilla described her as sincere, humble, and gracious. That's very nice to say about a person. One person said she was a reminder to all Tejanos, all Mexican Americans, all Latinos, that theirs is a beautiful culture with a beautiful language. Selena set an example for many young artists to follow. Her brilliant success proved that talent and hard work could overcome obstacles and knock down barriers. Her life has served as an inspiration for Latina girls. She was a symbol of the power of family, determination, and pride in one's heritage. She is also a reminder that all boys and girls with big dreams can strive to reach their goals no matter who they are or what those goals may be. The Queen of Tex-Mex lived her ideal of being at her best at all times and proved that the impossible is indeed possible. And I'm going to just leave you with this slide. These are my books, a little closer up. You can see Liz talked about them. Pacho Nacho and Just Right Family and Adoption Story. One of my fun books, which is Handimals. Look closely because it looks like a zebra, but it's really a hand painted to look like a zebra. There's my little tiny book about the Cuban bee hummingbird. It's in English and Spanish, and the Selenas and the Frida Kahlo in English and Spanish, which are little golden books. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we were talking before the program began, and you said that this book is very long, so you were sharing some parts of it, but thank you so much for the story that you told. I just want to remind the audience, if you do have a question for Sylvia, please type those in and we'll get to as many of those questions as we have. I see that we have several that have already come in, but if you have a question about her books or her life or Selena or even the illustrations, please put those in and we'll answer as many as we can get to. The question that I want to start with, Sylvia, and we talked about this a little bit again before the program began, is the illustrations. That first, the cover of your book is so stunning and striking, and it really kind of pulls you into the story immediately. What is that like to be an author and to work with an illustrator that you don't see every day or really communicate with? How does that relationship work to kind of bring your words and your story to life?
That's a great question, Liz. Actually, it's difficult for a picture book writer at first. And once you become, a famous picture book writer, then you have a little bit more say as to who's going to illustrate your book. And that can be difficult because you have an idea about what your book looks like in your own mind as you're writing it. And so you're just hoping that the editor who makes the choice, that the editor will choose someone who will actually put what you're thinking about and your view of the book on paper in illustrations. When I first saw the illustrations that Paola Escobar had made, and they sent me first the picture of the cover, I was just telling Liz before we started that I almost literally fell out of my chair because that was the most beautiful illustration. Selena was called La Flor. She has a song called Como la Flor, like the flower. And actually she has in Texas, they used to have, which I don't think they have it at this moment, but they probably will. They have a festival of the flower and it's all about her. And so Paola captured that beautifully by putting all these flowers in her hair. She is a very talented illustrator. She has done other beautiful books since this one, which have won awards. And this one in particular got placed in the Illustrators Hall of Fame exhibition this past year when the book came out for her. So yes, this is a gorgeous book. I also wanted to point out, if you have a way of looking closer at the illustrations, you will find little things. She has put a pendant on a necklace with the moon. She has that moon outside the window when Selena was born. She's got little tiny points here and there in her illustrations that reflect Selena's life. So I was saying that a picture book is half pictures and half words. And a lot of the credit goes to the illustrator, which It's given in some circles and sometimes not enough in other circles, but I couldn't be more pleased.
And what was it about Selena's story that spoke to you? Why did you choose Selena to write about? You have other books, but this is very specific. Are you a Selena fan? Do you enjoy her music, or what type of music do you enjoy?
I am now, and I do now. I have to tell you, the truth is, I was commissioned to do this book. The editor wrote to my agent and said, do you have someone that you think would be a good writer about Selena Quintanilla's life? And my editor, who is Karen Rensick of Red Fox Literary, and kind of threw me under the bus because she answered for me and then just CC'd the email and said, sure, Sylvia will love to do this. And, I was so happy that she did that. First of all, that she thought enough of me to think that this project, I could do it well. So I was very pleased, and I accepted immediately. It became a challenge because Hispanics and Latinos are we tend to be clumped together. And there are Nicaraguan Americans, there are Salvadorian Americans, and there are Venezuelan Americans and Argentinians. And, I am Cuban American. I am not Mexican American. I live on one side of the country here in Florida, and Selena lived all her life in Texas. It's a different culture. It's similar because we all speak Spanish, and of course we have values that we share as Hispanics and as people, as human beings. But they have a specific culture because of their history, the Texans and the Tejanos, and specifically the Tejanos. So I immersed myself into that culture, and I went researching. I'm a school librarian always, and an educator always. So research for me is not only imperative and wonderful, but I just enjoy doing research. I'm a fact finder. And so I went looking for facts, and the more I found them, the better this story got, and the better this young woman became. I was very impressed with her life and her work. And so it became very simple to do. So that's how I came up with the story.
So you started as a librarian, and this is kind of a second career for you as a children's book author. How did you make that transition? What made you decide to be to write children's books? And then if you had advice to give someone who was looking to write their own children's book, is there a resource that you would recommend that was helpful to you, or resources that you've come across as you've kind of gone through this journey that you would recommend to get started?
Sure, that's a wonderful question. I started writing when I was a child. I would write my own little stories. Usually there were fairy tales, like there was a princess and a prince and a fairy godmother somehow. I don't know, but those were my favorite stories to write about. And I also used to illustrate them, although I'm not an artist, but I could draw my little figures and then balloon captions up here and make my dialogue. As I grew, and I said I became an English major, my purpose was to teach English. And then it kind of veered into libraries because I was always in a library as a child. One of my greatest discoveries when I came as an immigrant child to the United States was that there were public libraries. It was like Halloween. You could just say trick or treat and get candy. Well, you go in there and you say, can I have these books, please? And they let you take them home. How great was that? So because I was an avid reader, I was an only child, so I had to entertain myself by writing and reading a lot. I was an avid reader. I was always in the library. So rather than go teach English, which I thought was a great idea at the time, and it would have been English literature, I still love it, American literature. But I thought, wait a minute, I love the younger kids and I love libraries. Let me put these two together. So I studied to become a librarian, and eventually, because my coursework was in education, I became a school librarian. I was in public libraries for a little while, but I went back to school libraries because I just enjoyed it. And so how did that transition into becoming a children's author? Well, there I am for 30 something years, immersed in children's literature and surrounded by children. I mean, you put the two of them together, what do you have? You have a children's writer. So I began writing my own books. I would pick up other people's books in the library, love them, or critique them and say, wait, I could have done that phrase better. So I began writing earlier, before I retired, probably 10 years before, 10 or 15 years even, but just casually, just stuff in my computer. Then as I got closer to retirement, I said, if I'm ever going to do this, I'm going to do it now. And so I'm a little bit of like the little red hen. I can do it all on my own. And I went and I started just writing and writing. It's a tough process. It's very competitive. Joined an organization that I recommend to everyone. It's called SCBWI, the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Anyone aspiring to become a children's writer or an illustrator, join that first, even if you have nothing published, because it's a wealth of information. They have conferences, which are fantastic. I would meet the same authors that I was shelving their books on my shelves. I was meeting them at these conferences. How good is that? And then the best thing too, besides that, is to join a critique group in your area. There are 2 critique groups in well, there's more than 2, but there's 2 main ones here in Miami. One is for young adult writers and middle grade novel writers. And they're actually the same thing. It's just that we meet at different times. And there's one for picture book writers, which I run. That one is the one that I run. And my good friend Marta Magellan runs the other one. And that is a resource if you want to be a writer, because you will have other pairs of eyes looking at this wonderful story that you wrote. And then they'll tell you, wait a minute, you can change this and this and this. And you're going, you're absolutely right. Yeah. So after the 100th revision, you're ready in your book to somebody, to 1 million people until you get an answer. I was fortunate to get an agent, and that helps a lot. That's another story, long story, how I got her, but that helps a lot. So it's a process, but mine began long ago with just a love of letters. And so that's where it began.
And you mentioned, that you love research and you love to do research. And even with a children's book, especially on a topic like Selena, a person who actually lived, there has to be that research that goes into the book, even if it's not a novel that you're writing, it's a picture book. So did you, when you were doing this research about her life, were you able to interview any of Selena's family? I know that there is a new Netflix series that was out on Selena. Had that come out yet when you were writing this, or did that come out afterwards? What was that research process like to kind of get this information for the story?
The research process, even in a children's book, has to be thorough. You have to be vetted. You have to have authorities that, in this case, I did not get to interview anyone, but I mean, it was difficult, and maybe we could have done that, not because they didn't want to or anything, but because I just found so much written and online. And a lot of it were interviews given by members of her family. I watched her interviews, the interviews with members of her family. I watched all her videos. I sang that bitty bitty bum bum around the house until I drove people nuts. And my husband finally said, stop, stop already, because it's a very catchy song. I read articles about her. I read books about her. There are books, adult books written about her, which I just got from the library and just read through them. So I immersed myself into her life and made sure, this is very important, what I'm going to say here. Just because you write for children doesn't mean that the facts don't have to be absolutely perfect. And it doesn't even have to be a nonfiction book like this one. In my book, Pacho Nacho, which is a retelling of an old Japanese tale, I went back and looked at that Japanese tale that was oral tradition of 2,000 years ago and see how that differed. And I mention it in my back matter. The same with the adoption book. I wrote to people. I contacted people here who run adoption organizations. So, and it's a story, it's fiction, it's pachonacho, but even more so with something like this, or with the Frida Kahlo book or the Sonia Sotomayor, you have to read what is out there about them. You have to soak up everything, and you have to make sure that the facts are all correct, because as we know, not everything that's put in the internet is correct. So if you find a fact, and you have a good editor that will vet it and send it to some person with great credentials, and you will revise and revise until everything is perfect.
And you mentioned too that your illustrator had to do a lot of research as well when she was illustrating the book, and the beautiful and very small details that she put in that makes it more meaningful. So it's not just, you're not just her life for the words, you're illustrating her, or I'm sorry, you're researching her life for the illustrations as well, because you want to make sure that those details match up. So an incredible amount of work goes into one picture book. Even if it's not a very long book, there's a lot that goes into that process.
And actually, the shorter the book, the harder it is, because you need to make sure that you're saying some very important things in very few words, and words that will reach the audience and will be suitable for the audience that you're aiming to reach. The illustrator, like you mentioned, Paola did. She's younger than I am. She did not particularly. She knew Selena, but she was when she was a little girl when Selena was popular. And so she had to research not only Selena, but also the times, the cars, the furniture in the house, if you will notice, the clothing, the accessories that the people are wearing, and the hair. She did all that meticulous research to make sure that it looked like the 1970s and 80s. And a lot of work goes into illustrations in order for them to be just as perfect as the story is.
A question that I want to ask, we are almost to the end of Hispanic Heritage Month, which comes to an end next week. But I want to ask about kind of the importance of children and young people being able to recognize themselves in books and in television shows and other media that they consume. How important is that to you as a children's book author to write these stories so that kids can see role models that look like them?
I think it's very important. I think it's something that the time has come for that. I don't like to go overboard on things where you say, well, okay, you can't write that because you're not of that group, or no, you don't want to put a blonde, blue-eyed child because not everybody is blonde and blue-eyed. I think there has to be a happy medium. I think children do need to recognize themselves in books. Not, it's funny because they say, well, children of immigrant families or minorities, mostly immigrant families, have trouble, learning. The immigrant children might have a little trouble getting the English at first. They pick the English up real fast. What becomes a bigger problem is they have a reality at home with their own traditions and their own families and their food and everything. And when they get to school, they find a different reality, or when they read books, they find a different reality. So the trick is to find a happy medium. You will present a lot of realities to children. They will be able to see themselves, but they will also be able to see other people's realities, because I think that's the way to tolerance. That's the way to compassion. That's the way to understanding among people. If you begin that early and you show that we are all alike in so many ways, even if we manage to be different. So, and they're all good. So yes, absolutely. The time has come. When I was growing up here, in my early teens, there were very few stories and few novels written with Latino or Hispanic girls like me. But I didn't mean that I didn't enjoy all of those. I mean, I did. I enjoyed them and I read them. But now I see that it could have been a little bit more varied. And I think that's where we're heading.
Well, we have time for just one last thought before we go. And I'd just like to ask you, for anybody who's watching or who will be watching the recording, is there any advice that you would give to any of our brave girls or any of the families who are watching, whether it's about writing a book or choosing a story, or even changing careers as you go on, as you as you did? What kind of final thoughts would you leave us with today?
Well, as far as girls are concerned, I've been around for a while, and so I've seen the transition between what could happen and what women and girls could do when I was a lot younger, and what they're capable of doing now, and what they are being pushed to now, and being allowed and encouraged to do. I think that girls and all people, but we're talking about brave girls, need to be persistent. They need to set their goals. They need to be persistent. You cannot be discouraged when you're a writer, when you're an author. The rejection letters could paper your walls. Literally, I used to get physical rejection letters. Now we get them in email or no answer, but physical letters could paper my bathroom. And you have to just say, okay, well, that one didn't like it. I'm going to keep going to the next one. And that's what you need to do, whatever your career choice is. Take the next step and continue going down that road. Girls especially can be anything that they want to be and do anything that they want to do in this world. And we live in a society that is fortunate to allow that and to encourage that. And I think more and more. So by all means, if you would like to be a writer, go to college and study, literature, so you can see what other people wrote and follow that. Follow that. You learn from everybody else. Read a lot and write your thoughts down, because they will come back at some point. You can go back to them, and then you can expand and you have a story.
Thank you, Sylvia, for being with us this afternoon, for sharing Selena's story with us. I do want to remind everyone that this presentation today is being recorded. It will be available on the National Women's History Museum's YouTube channel for this week. If you enjoyed today's Brave Girls program, please join us on Wednesday, October 20th, when author Delonda Coleman will be here for a special Halloween-themed reading of her book, More Than a Princess, with Q&A to follow. And on Wednesday, November 10th, author Karen M. Greenwald will return for a full reading of her book, A Vote for Susanna, the First Woman Mayor in Observance of Election Day. I just want to thank you so very much for taking the time, for reading the story, and for answering all of our questions so beautifully. And to our audience for being with us. Thank you. We hope to see you all again very soon.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.